is there any situation where you have multiple consciousnesses in one brain? So multiple consciousnesses in one brain is actually possible according to IIT, if IIT is correct, right? Two complexes correspond to two consciousnesses. And as a candidate, you might have heard of these split brain patients, and that's what we are going to target. So the first thing is about the phenomenology or behaviors of the split brain patient, one mind or two minds. And this is a link to split brain patient.
Experimenter will then say, well, pick out the card that best describes what you may have seen. And sure enough, the patient goes out very calmly and points to the word fork. So that what happens in the split brain patient is that all the sensory information that is projected and arrives in the left hemisphere can be talked about. But all that information that arrives in the right hemisphere is perceived and acted upon, but it is not talked about because the patient has no awareness of it in terms of his ability to verbally, audibly express it out loud.
If speech originates in the left half of the brain, are there any functions special to the other half? Here, a split brain subject provides the answer. As he tries to copy this pattern with blocks, we discover his ability is confined to his right half brain.
Now let's remember that the left hand is governed from the right hemisphere, and you will see that he has absolutely no problem in solving the problem. When the patient tries to solve the problem with his right hand, which is governed from the left hemisphere, we find that he is not capable of doing it. Namely, that the right hand, which is governed from the left hemisphere, is intrinsically incapable of performing this kind of visual constructional tasks. It's interesting to note that the whole perspective is gone. He has 3-in-1 block combinations. It doesn't even square them up. You can see the left hand wants to keep helping the right and is interfering. Well, we're now seeing that the left hand can perform the problem and that the right hand cannot. Now the question becomes, what happens when you allow both hands together to try to solve the problem? And what we find out is that they fight over each other. One hand knows how to do it and one hand does not, and so they more or less squabble. And the reason for this is that the hemispheres are disconnected. The right hemisphere controls the left hand and the left hemisphere controls the right hand. And these are almost mutually independent systems. It was as if two people were fighting over performing this task. One knew how and one didn't, and one would fight for dominance of the situation.
So that was quite a striking video of the split brain patient. The point here is that his right hand is governed by the left hemisphere, which speaks, but very bad at sort of a block, task. And then when he tries to do that with the right hand, then right hand or left hemisphere tries to do it, it's really poor. But the left hand, which is governed by the right hemisphere, then it can do it really easily. And so when the right is really struggling, left is trying to help it, right? And then that's cheating. So he had to put the left hand onto the behind, below his hip. But when they are allowed to cooperate together, because they don't actually really cooperate in the beginning, at least after the split brain operation, then it's just a mess. And he as doctor said, it's almost like two people fighting each other. In general, the split brain patient starts to become more cooperative. Not really through talking between left hemisphere and the right hemisphere with a verbal exchange, but more to do with some kind of unconscious agreement or whatever. We actually don't know what's happening inside of this split brain patient primarily because this study has never been done. So there are lots of things to be done, but the number of the split brain patients are also decreasing. So it's not that easy to understand what's going on in the future, but still, that is a very important kind of phenomenological question. Okay. So just to give you an data, anatomy-wise, corpus callosum is the one that connects between the brains, and then from the sagittal view, you see this C kind of tilted C shape, and that is a major pathway from left cortex to right cortex. But there is also a huge and important kind of connection called anterior commissure, and that locates around here. And then that also connects between left and the right hemisphere. So if this one is left out in terms of split brain operation, in many cases, the left and the brain hemisphere can communicate. And as a sort of trivia, it turns out that marsupials in Australia, like kangaroo and the koala and many other animals, they don't have a corpus callosum actually, but they have a huge anterior commissure, and that allows probably the left-right hemisphere communication. And this is a sort of 3D view of the corpus callosum. And here's the sort of the situation in the normal subject, where left visual field and the right visual field projects to left and right hemisphere separately. Note that left eye and the right eye is not the corresponding thing about the left and right hemisphere. Okay, it's different from the motor control. Motor control, right side of the hand is controlled by the left hemisphere, and the left hand is controlled by the right side. But about the visual hemisphere, it's not really right and left eye, left and right visual field. Okay. Anyway, when you're looking at the fixation point at the center, and if you briefly show the key to the left visual field, then that projects to the right hemisphere, and then it goes to left hemisphere eventually, and then if it's intact, then we can say key. And then traditionally, it's been thought that this same kind of thing happens for the split brain patient, and he cannot tell that, oh, I don't know what I saw. And then, but when you presented it in the right visual field, then it goes to left hemisphere field, and so he can say that it is a key. Okay. So this is one of the anecdotal evidence saying that if you're showing a laugh on the left side, then the patient can laugh. But if you ask why are you laughing, then a patient can say that what a way to make a living doing this kind of testing every day. So the text laugh goes to the right hemisphere, and that makes this patient laugh. But she can't verbalize why she laughed, because she doesn't have an explanation of seeing the laugh, the command on the display, right? So she makes up this, reason for the laughter. But then, same goes for the, walk. As commanded, she walks away. But then when asked, where are you going? Then she comes up with this, fake answer. Oh, I wanted a soda. That's a sort of the story that has been told over the many years, in a sense. And then IAT, according to IAT, this is explained by one consciousness from two hemispheres in a standard brain, where two of this, hemisphere-like situation, here depicted simply as 8 neurons that are connected to each other with a complex way. And then through the corpus callosum, some of the key neurons are connected. And then that makes it difficult to cut anywhere, and that results in this big number of the integrated information. That's one complex within one brain. On the other hand, in the case of the split brain, the left side and the right side has more or less the same local connectivity here as the same thing. But corpus callosum is the only one that is, cut. And then in that case, each of this, complex can exist on its own, and itself has a relatively huge integrated information, because there's no way to cut it, in an intact way. And that is the proposed sort of, reason why split brain patient doesn't complain anything about, particular loss of the sensation or, loss of consciousness and so on. However, this has been recently challenged by some recent, more subtle and detailed examination of the split brain patients. So the upper three is the traditional view of report in terms of naming, Bavary, and the left and the right, hand, answer. But what they found was that, okay, so like previous finding has suggested, if the patient was asked to say whether they are two things are same or different, right? Then the patient was at chance, completely, unclear why, but you just can't say, whether it's same or different. And then when they are forced, it's still a chance. And the same is, traditional finding. Okay. However, the difference comes when there is only one object at a time. So if there is one object, then traditionally the left side stimulus, when they are fixating at the center, goes to the right hemisphere, and that doesn't have a Bavara ability. So he cannot say, yes or no. And then the right hemisphere controls the left hand. So here, left hand says yes, and the right hand is controlled by the left hemisphere. So unclear, no. But this study showed in 2 patients that all of them can say yes. And then same goes for the right stimulus situation. Right stimulus processed in the left hemisphere can report Bavary, yes, and report yes with the right hand, but not with the left hand. But in this new finding, all of this modality, yes. And we don't know why this is a case that, from this to, situation, it's really unclear why patient cannot compare the 2 stimulus, right? So this is an open question, but it poses a bit of the doubt about this complete independence of the split brain patient, consciousness. But no, there can be many complications, but at least in the acute phase, which means that then after the operation and the patient recovers, there are many anecdotal evidence reported, not only that the block design situation, but also when the patient is feeling hot and then the time opening all this shut button, then the other side of the hand start to close. And then, going open and close, open, close, repeatedly, and then patient gets very confused and so on. This kind of thing has been reported. So it's still not clear, but there is lots of things to understand or study in the split brain patient phenomenology and neuroscience and also theory as well. Now, we also talk about what happens if the brains are actually connected. Okay, so that was this amazing conjoined twins, and there is some discussion about this underlying neural mechanisms. And one thing that is potentially possible to explain through IIT-like formulation is that each of these 2 hemispheres themselves are connected very strongly through this their own corpus callosum to make one complex in each brain. However, the connections between these 2 brains are much weaker, either unidirectional or bidirectional. As the video says, it may be the bidirectional ones, but it could be just smaller or weaker, and that could be the reason why these 2 girls apparently have a completely different consciousness, but can share the feeling or thirstiness or tickles and things like that, going from one to the other. So 2 separate consciousness, but can share something. But having said that, it's very unknown what's actually happening in this brain and what they are feeling. So it's just a very interesting cases that we want to study in the future. So just to give you an implication wise, so it's not easy to for more than 2 brains to generate one complex. Okay, one complex, one consciousness in general. And our cases of left and right brain connected through the corpus callosum to give rise to one is, in a sense, exception rather than the rule. And once some people actually understand IIT, they may immediately suggest that integrated information can be actually computed across brains, and as long as they are kind of interacting or causally related, then there must be some kind of consciousness, uber consciousness, the bigger consciousness, like when we dance or when we play together or when we have mutually causal kind of interaction, then the consciousness might be united. And in fact, we analyze the EEG between the two brains in this particular paper that I'm listing here. That suggests that there is an integrated information between the brains as well. But it doesn't mean that there is a one consciousness across the brains. That's because local maxima is the one that is the IIT is predicting to be the source of consciousness. And in many cases, unless you have a direct and very specific kind of connections, even two brains, two hemispheres that are connected at some level, like Tatiana and Krista case, doesn't generate one consciousness. So my guess is that probably it's true for the ants, or bees, or plants that are connected through some kind of ecosystem, but so far nobody has actually computed integrated information of these constructs, so we don't know the possibility of the bigger consciousness for ants or bees or plants. But if it does, then each individual consciousness will have to cease to exist. All right, so in summary, boundary of consciousness wise, according to IIT, one consciousness can split into two if the system is cut into two, like split brain operations. And if one complex splits into two complexes, then that's two consciousnesses, right? And then conjoined twins seem to share sensory experience, but retains two consciousness. And so this case is maybe the situation where two complexes exist, but it shares the same inputs. So the remaining questions: how can IIT, in principle, explain the contents of consciousness or qualia? I described today that it is going from levels and then boundary, and the next one is the contents. Why different areas of the brain differentially contributes to different aspects of the consciousness? I've kind of primed to this question throughout the lectures and weeks. For example, faces from fusiform face areas, motions from V5MT, and the colors from V4PA. Why these different areas generates these different experiences and more, sound and taste and smell. But each of the areas contains just neurons. It's not like face neurons, motion neurons, color neurons have a different chemicals or physics. They are all the same, but more or less, generates completely different experience. Why? Why for vision? Why for sound? So the next question will be, how can we test them? And that's going to be the topic that I'm going to discuss in the final lecture next week. See you by then.